America, this is the Ace Michael Show. Today, chatting about autism. Yes, sir. Autism is a very, very big disease. Its name alone is becoming like the deal changer, like cancer. Like when you say cancer, people know you're not playing around. This is not a joke. Things have gotten real. You're talking about the C word. And autism is also a big one that will change the course of your meal. But a lot of people don't know so much about autism as they know about cancer. So today on the show, I brought a guest on who knows quite a bit about this topic. And please welcome to the show, first timer, Mr. Charles Dowling is with us today. Charles, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very great. Thank you for inviting me here.
So let's jump right into it. I know you're going to have a lot to tell us and inform us about. Let's start with autism, because I know you got some other hustles that you brought on the show. You got some side hustles that are also some mental health issue hustles. But let's start with autism. Why is autism such a big deal?
Well, it's a big deal because people still get bullied for it in schools. There's still a lot of discrimination despite the laws, against, ableism and all that in workplaces. And I have been, the subject of such discrimination as well. And I feel like it's been very the underbelly, of discrimination here, especially, here in the country and even in Vegas, as you know. Autism is a big spectrum. There's the people who have, level 1, which is the people who can communicate, pretty good. And then there are ones who, are mute, they require different, methods of communication, they're more sensory, there's sensory issues involved. So it's a pretty big, topic that has just not really been discussed as much.
And so when we think of autism, we're not talking about Rain Man. We're not talking about colorful, festive, celebratory autism that's cool and interesting to talk about at parties. We're talking a little bit more like problematic nerve disease and mental challenges that are not funny. They're not cute in most cases. Is that correct, or am I an idiot?
Yeah, you're on the right track. It's still a positive thing. I want to point out that, it's not like a negative thing. There are, autism is something that I personally do embrace. However, it's something that people still get, there's still a lot of stigma against it, per se.
And it's not like Rain Man. It's not like, my cousin's autistic, so let's go to Vegas and make money. Like this autism cannot be flipped into something that turns into a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme.
Oh, definitely, yeah, no.
Right, interesting. Which is too bad, but I kind of had my heart set on that. But okay, so tell us a little bit more about your work within the autism community, or would that be autistic community?
Autism, it's whatever people say. Everybody identifies in a different way. It's kind of just like if you're in the LGBT community, as I am as well. It's just whatever you identify. Everybody goes with different identities, but basically, I was diagnosed very late, and it wasn't a formal diagnosis, but it was when the doctors were actually testing me for OCD, a mental illness. And when they were testing me out and, just asking me questions, they had diagnosed me verbally with Asperger's, which is now...
I've heard of that too, but I don't know much about it.
Well, Asperger's is level 1 autism. It's actually not a term that people often use anymore because it's now associated with a Nazi who did some horrible bad things, so we do not like to use that term. A lot of people in the autistic community actually shed away from that term.
Wait a minute, is that where the name comes from?
It comes from Asperger, Hans Asperger.
Really?
Yeah.
So he was a Nazi. Was he in the what do they call it? I don't know, the SS. He was a part of
he was part of the party. I don't have the historical context of where exactly, but he was one of those who was responsible for separating what he called quote-unquote good autistics versus bad autistics, which we now know is not the case. It's just, who can communicate better, who cannot. And that's why a lot of people... I thought
I was evil until I hear some shit some Nazis did. I thought I was a bad guy. But this is really, what was wrong with those people? And where did they all go, by the way? I hate to digress from what you're talking about, but it just popped into my head. Like, if you look at a film reel from the 1940s or even the 50s, you'll see Adolf Hitler in a sea of Nazis. There's like millions of people were Nazis. They were part of that party, right? Millions.
Yup, and people were blindly following them.
Yeah, and you go, well, where did they all go? Where are they now? It's only 50 years later. Where are they?
Oh, I think I want to say they moved somewhere to South America. There's a movie about some that found refuge in some country in South America. I do not know exactly, but there's some context with that. I'm actually my mom's side is part Jewish. They kind of fled around that time too. But yeah, they also did stuff against the autistic community, and that's also why that's some of the discrimination that does continue until today.
That's nuts. That is nuts. Okay, so I did digress. Let's get back to what you're talking about, which was way more on point. So you've been working in this community. What is it, the work that you do?
Well, what I do is I just advocate online. I just advocate, for people who have this, disease. I am in the Order of the Arrow, which is part of the Boy Scouts of America, and I embrace myself. I express myself in the arts. I was a dancer at the age of 14, which is they do like Native American style stuff. You got to be very respectful, and it helped me, break out of my eggshell. It really helped me express myself and express, who I, really was, because, even at that time, I didn't even know I had autism. I was still what they call it, it'll come back to my head, but it's where you really just hide the effects of autism. And I didn't even know I was doing that until I realized I was diagnosed. But I was expressing myself, and it was the only real place that I really had a sense of identity, in those arts, which I really found refuge in, because I was personally bullied at a young age too, and it was an escape.
Now, how did you find out that you had autism, that you were autistic?
Oh, the doctors just told me plain on.
But,
I had a psychiatrist as well that told me.
But were you experiencing any troubles or anything that led you to think, wait a minute, is there something going on that I need to know more about? Like if I have, for example, if I have a little pain in my chest, I'm going to go to the doctor because I feel like there's heart issues.
Right.
Right. So did you have something that happened that you were like, you know what, I need to check this out. What's going on with me?
Well, the OCD symptoms worsened, which I got diagnosed in 2019, went along with the autism, at the age of 16. I am 20 now. But, from the time I was pretty much born, I had speech problems. I was in a preschool at the University of Arizona, their preschool, for speech development, because I was delayed in speech. So they helped me through, and they helped me, hide those, those stereotypical features of autism, the communication problems. I want that expressing yourself more specifically, like I want this toy, I want that. And I knew there was something different about me compared to the other, kids at school, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know at that time.
And so kids actually bullied you, which is interesting because, autism, I guess, is a disease to where you can't just look at, and I apologize if I called it a disease and that offended anyone.
No.
I'm unfortunately, I don't know what else to refer to it as, because that's what I grew up calling it. But what my point was that this is something that you can't look at a person and say, oh, he's autistic, just any more than you can look at a person and say, oh, he's gay, or he's bi, or he's gender neutral, or anything. Like, you are a handsome guy. You're obviously an intelligent guy. You dressed well. Your clothes are matching. Your shoes are tied. You're doing better than me today on a fashion sense. I love those beads you're wearing too.
Oh, thanks.
But no one's going to look at you and go, oh, this guy's got autism, let's pick on him.
And sometimes, I look at myself and I think, wow, I really don't. Sometimes it's like where you don't feel like your sense of belonging in the community because you don't have those, stereotypes. But at the end of the day, I know what I got. I know it's something that I have to live with. I know it's something I got to embrace, because if I don't embrace, I will be, mentally in the wrong place, So I just do my best to, show everyone, this is what autism can also look like. Autism isn't just the person that's in a wheelchair, having troubles moving around. It could be somebody just like me who's just having a regular conversation about the weather today, just the rain today.
Now, tell me, what are the challenges for an autistic person?
Number one is sensory issues and communication issues. From the time I was young, I had some hard times with social cues. If somebody made a face and said, it's time to go, or if somebody had that look that where it's like, shut up, dude, and you don't see it until people actually let you know. Oh no, it looks like they want you to stop talking. It's those kind of things, and also sensory things. If you have a certain blanket and you don't like the feeling of that blanket, if you don't like the taste of a certain food, if you don't, because there's a sensation that's just like, I want this out of my mouth. It's like touching a hot stove for us, per se. That's the
Right,
best
right.
way I can describe it. And these hot stoves, that's just what makes our anxiety. And you talked about disease,
Yeah.
mental illness. That is a big thing. Many people in the autism community have different mental illnesses. I have OCD and PTSD and depression diagnosed, and I did have a few suicide attempts in the past because of this trauma that I had from the bullying later on. And it's a real big problem that's in the autism community. A lot of mental illness, and a lot of people are undiagnosed as well, based off of studies as well. So it's a very big issue.
Let me throw something at you here. I'm just curious, Charles. So in LA, I went to the Scientology museum that they have that's based on psychiatry, and how terrible and horrific the industry of psychiatry has been to individuals. How they used to say, maybe 100 years ago, they used to say, oh, well, if you have autism, then you're possessed by demons. And then they would do these experiments, and they would put people in hospital, quote unquote hospitals.
Yeah.
And of course, the drug reinforcement therapy was terrible for a lot of people. I'm leading to a question, which is, now we find that a lot more things are acceptable in our society and aren't considered horrendous diseases that we need to take you and send you off to a mental institution. Even homosexuality at one point was considered, oh my God, he's a witch.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
we got to burn him to see if he's really gay or not, right? So all of this stuff. Do you think that autism and PTSD and ADHD, I think I'm using
ADHD.
ADHD. Do you think that these things will ever become commonplace in our society, where we won't feel like will there be an over-the-counter pill that you can just take to, measure out your autism?
That is something I do think about a lot, because I do look at, the way it's progressed today, and there are some things that have changed and there are some things that have not changed, with psychiatry. For one, in the mental hospitals I've been at, because I was in mental hospitals after my attempts, I had some good experiences and some pretty poor experiences. Some people, the pills, some people were just hushed with pills just to make them go to sleep, which is not something that a pill is really meant for. It's meant to, cure an illness. But, there is, I believe there are people working about that in medical schools, but the thing is, I don't think there can be a 100% cure. I think there's treatments that will eventually be proven to work, but to cure something, I think, is something that might be out of the question.
Interesting. And so, because we'll run out of time, and I'm really sorry, because I'm very excited about what you're saying.
No, this
so
is interesting, yeah.
with autism, it is becoming more understood. It is becoming more, I don't want to say commonplace, but for lack of a better word, I'm going to say it's more accepted in our society. It's not such a big deal for people. Like, I'm just going to say this terrible thing, like Down syndrome. If a family knows that their baby might have Down syndrome, which now we can predict that in the genealogy test, the genetic test will let us know when somebody's going to have a tendency towards Down syndrome. And so then many of those parents might opt then to have an abortion if it's legal, because they say, well, I don't want to put the kid through this. We don't want to have this experience, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole nother show, whether you agree with that mentality or not.
Yeah.
But that is a reality. Now, autism, and I do have a young cousin who has who's autistic. It isn't that big a deal for a lot of people, it seems. Am I right there? That autism is something that can be pretty much managed and worked through. I know a mom who's done our show, and she has 2 children that are autistic, and she's coping just fine. She's a single mom. She's doing her thing. She's working and taking care of her kids, and the 2 of them have autism, and she doesn't ever say, "Oh my gosh, it's so hard on me. What did God gave me this burden? What?" None of that stuff. It's just life. It is what it is.
I will say compared to 20 years ago, it's much better. Back in the day, they would just throw you in special ed if you were communicating bad. If you weren't, you were kind of just left untreated, kind of like me. It took me, until my teenage years, to do it. But I think now people are really starting to understand these things. Just like I said, like they're starting to understand, the LGBT community, just like they're understanding, that there's no problem with interracial marriage, like compared to
right.
And that was a bad thing. Even just with immigrants like my Polish and Jewish family, those things are more accepted now, like based off of religion. There's nothing wrong with, it's just a part of these things that are slowly becoming more understood, if
Absolutely.
I could say that.
Yeah. Well put. Okay, Charles, how do we find you on social media?
Well, you can go to my Instagram. It's L as in lion, A as in apple, C as in cat. Sorry, let me do that again. L as in lion, A as in apple, C as in cat. No, sorry.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
Because I don't send messages to myself, so I forget. I go, I think it's...
It's when you have to say the letters like that. So it's L as in lion, A as in apple, S as in song, C as in cat, F as in frog, D as in dog. And then that's Instagram. You can find my Facebook. It's Charles Francis Dowling, Dowling. I also have an older Instagram account, which you can easily find. It's through _Charles Dowling. That was hacked, but you can also see some of the things I posted on there beforehand. I have kept a lot of those on, just for viewers that just are interested to view.
For the shits and the giggles. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, my man, Charles, thank you so much for being on the show today. Guys, thank you for listening, sharing, liking, subscribing. You know what's up. If you want to be on the show, we'd love to have you. And you know what I say? Live the life you love. Love the life you live. Thank you.